So before we begin, ARIN has a lot of services it offers to the community. So as DNS. DNS is fairly easy. You ask a query to get a response. And it's basically a hash. So it's very, very computationally easy to, given the query, find a response. So therefore, it's fairly easy. It's fairly easy to service. Whois, on the other end, is much different beast, or directory services that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit, because you can ask a question, and a lot of times we don't have any idea what you're really asking for. So we have to do lots and lots of queries to figure it out and come back with hits. So it's a much more different sort of complex animal that we have to deal with. And frankly, in the world, there's not a lot of people who do this type of thing. We also have web services, right? Everybody wants to go to ARIN's site. Everyone wants to go to ARIN Online. We make that available. Provisioning, making sure that is highly available, whether you go through email templates or you go through RegRWS, which is our RESTful API. You have IRR. You have RPKI. You have FTP. So all these things are highly robust services that we put out, and they're redundant as well, and much like almost every place in terms of what they do in terms of having good internet presence. But what I really want to talk about is the directory services component, which is Whois RWS, RDAP, and soon RPSL when we put out IRR services. And our goal here is actually make this available for you. So if you have a question that you want Whois the answer, or RDAP, or Whois RWS, that you get a response within a timely manner. And of course, you need to abide by the Whois terms of service that's out there as well. Who here is actually willing to admit that they do not abide by the Whois terms of service? Oh, okay. Okay, so we know that there's a lot of automation that's in the mix because we see it. There's no way that humanly possible that you can type those questions as fast as we see the things that are coming across the internet. Maybe Rob here, he's volunteering. Okay, we're on, but to see what goes on here. But in automation, a lot of times the rates are so high that we actually have to do something. And so we're going to introduce the concept called tar pitting. So the abuse is continued. It's continued for a number of meetings. I've talked about this at ARIN 40, 41, and now 42. So, and every time we have some sort of abuse that occurs, we have to have basically a response team. It involves operations. It involves the developers because maybe there's something wrong with the code. And a lot of times it involves even me. I notify Nate, who notifies John. So it's a pretty invasive set of things that occur. And of course this interrupts sleep, depending on the time, interrupts work, and sometimes it interrupts both, especially if it's a long-term event. So, and of course this doesn't scale, right? I mean, so you have a small team at ARIN, and you have this abuse that occurs, and it occurs from all over the world, and how are you going to deal with this? So anyways, the terms of use that we have out there talks about what you do with the data, but doesn't talk about acceptable query rates. And we have nothing about that. So here you have a normal day, right? You can see that we had a little bit of traffic going up. And it's about double our normal or triple our normal usage. But you can see that traffic here is pretty normal. And you can see that there's basically 2,000 queries per second that come across the nodes. Actually, and that's on one particular site. So that turns out to be about 6,000 queries per second that's going across our entire constellation. So I used to work at VeriSign, and we had a Whois system there as well. Those numbers were not seen at VeriSign back in the day when I was there. And that's what we're seeing at ARIN today. But, and you can see here that traffic, here's our error reporting. This is fairly normal, and actually there's nothing to be alarmed about with these numbers. The blue is basically closes, or no answers, so, or the client closed the connection early before they got the response. So there's really nothing here. Now here's the abuse. Now I said that, hey, on a normal day you see about 2,000 queries per second per site on a sort of aggregate basis, and we have 3 sites. Now you can see that we're up to 6 million, if I got that right. And you can say, wow, that's pretty amazing. And you can see that we had quite a bit of spikes about this. So let's go see what happened to the performance on the servers itself. You see all those green lines are up there? Those are rejections because our load was so high. So you were trying to actually do a query, but basically we were trying to ingest all those queries that we actually had to throw people out of the system to actually get back to regular, normal operating system procedures. So anyways, you can see here that this is something, and of course we are all working on trying to figure out who was the offender and actually deal with it, right? So this is something that, as a public service, that we have to take care of. But you can see here that it's kind of an issue. So we want to solve this, and we want to solve this in an automated way. But before I begin, what I want to do is sort of describe the infrastructure that we have within our directory services component. You all see who is, but it involves more than who is. It involves RDAP, who is RWS, which is a RESTful interface we have to it, and soon RPSL. And you can see here that we have all these different ways of getting data from the user side, which comes from our F5, which is our load balancer. And if it's who is, it goes, which is a text query. It goes to basically a protocol translator that changes the Java and XML to our engine here, which actually goes and says, okay, I need to ask these questions to our database here that's on each local node that we have, and come back with the answer, which is then aggregated within the protocol analyzer, sent out across via text to the client. Or if you're using RDAP or RWS or our user interface, you go through an Apache interface. And you go through the same protocol engine and you deal with the same database. And what's interesting here is this Postgres entrance, that is our main provisioning database, right? When you go ahead and put in your reassignments or you get an allocation from ARIN, that is all stored in our Postgres instance. We have this replicator, which actually in near real time, actually takes that information, propagates it to our various, who is our directory services site. So you see the updates in near real time. So anyways, here's our traffic trends. You can see that we have about 110 million requests per day on a normal basis. 90% of that is who is on port 43. Almost 7% is who is our WS, which is a nice interface. RDAP, which is an IETF standard that we have, that actually Andy Newton in the back actually is the father of RDAP, and I want to acknowledge him as such. And then we have about 1% actually going through our user interface. So, and for our node, in each node, there's 6 nodes per site, and we have 3 sites. Each node sees 63 queries per second normally, and 7 queries per second on the various other sort of requests. So it gives you sort of a breakout what's normal for us. But we have these surges, right? It's usually 3 times our normal traffic, which we can ingest pretty easily. And obviously there's bots involved. And I'm going to get into this on the next page. Most of these requests, we've actually tuned the system so 90% of those queries are answered from cache. So it doesn't go to the backend, doesn't go to the database. We actually answer and it goes back to the client and so on. We've actually built up a lot of good effective caching, but when we do see things that are abnormal, like people asking us, hey, who owns example.com? I mean, does ARIN have that information? No, it doesn't. So why are they asking us? I don't know. But anyways, when those sort of queries come through, our database connections sort of max out, and the CPU usage rises. Because we're trying to figure out, what are you asking for? That's not an IP address. Is example.com someone's name, or is it organization? I'm not exactly sure. And this comes out of cookbooks that people have out there. And I talked about this at ARIN 40, that people are actually, people have actually said, here's how you get all the information out of ARIN's database. Go ahead and go to AWS, get VMs from someone else, I don't care where, and here's some tools that you can use to query us and pull things down. I'm sorry, I pulled up AWS as an example, but that's one that they used. So, okay, so what we've done so far is we done improvements to our systems, and we spent a lot of time on this. And the big thing that we need to deal with, and for example, example.com we got rid of. So if you come in and ask us for example.com, we're going to say, oh, that's a domain name. We don't have an answer for you, and come back with the answer right away. And we also gone on to talk about tar pit. We have installed tar pitting, which Mike Crossan back there. Why don't you wave your hand, Mike? So why don't you wave it a little bit more for those who just didn't turn around quick enough. So if you have any questions about this at the end of the presentation, he's the guy you want to talk to. So anyways, let's go talk about tar pitting some. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to find an automated way to stop this abuse. And so what we didn't want to do is put an effective rate limit on what you want to do. But what we wanted to do is be able to defend our systems so that when some sort of real amazing abuse actually comes through, or high query rates rather, that we can actually sustain service. And so what we do is if that limit is exceeded, we put you on a queue. And that queue is looked at every 2 seconds. And if you're still sustaining that rate, we keep it on the queue a little bit longer. If you go underneath that rate, then your question is then answered just a little bit later. And if you've continued to sustain that rate, we'll actually send a reset for that particular query that was put in this penalty box. So therefore, we have a way to actually automatically, in an automated fashion, be able to start slowing down what y'all are doing. Or not y'all, whoever those people are. So here's a flow diagram on how you see this. We do have a whitelist. So if you have a legitimate need for high rates, we actually have a way of actually putting you and saying, okay, look, you can go through this and not be tar pitted. And that's the main thing about this diagram. Again, if you have any questions, go talk to Mike. And here's the example. Say you have 100 queries per second. You're coming at, hitting us at 100 queries per second. But you decide, hey, I want to do 105 queries per second. What happens to those 5 queries? Well, they get put in this penalty box. And if you go underneath that sustained rate, say you start going, okay, I'm going a little bit too fast, I go down to 99, then one of those queries out of that 5 that was put in that penalty box will be answered on subsequent seconds so that the queue will actually go down. But if you sustain that rate or go above that rate, those particular queries will be dropped on the floor. So anyways, I wanted to give you a little bit of an update of what we're doing. We're also looking at elasticity of this system. Right now we have only so many boxes we have to do. We're looking at, but to do so we have to make some architectural changes, so it wouldn't be too expensive on ARIN, putting these things in the cloud nets and so on and so forth. So we're looking at this. We've spent quite a bit of time on it, and it's something that we want to serve with the community. But we also wanted you to be aware that, hey, we're seeing some pretty high rates, and this is what we're doing to actually solve the problem. So with that, are there any questions?
So I actually find this quite upsetting as a community member. This is data that is really potentially useful for a lot of people. Sorry, Daniel Dent, QA2. Hi, thanks. And so what I'm hearing is that actors that are willing to go to a lot of effort to bypass your policies, those are the people that have the data, and everybody else in the community doesn't. So why isn't it just being made available as a bulk download so that you don't have this problem?
Actually, there is a bulk download that people actually can use. But they choose not to for various reasons. You do have to sign an agreement to get this bulk download. So and perhaps it may be lack of knowledge, and we've actually had a case of this.
But don't you think that a lot of those people, in fact, maybe the agreement is the problem? And given that they're getting the data anyway, how does this actually improve the situation?
That's certainly true. So go ahead.
So if the community wishes to provide the data by bulk download, we will do that. Historically, you've said you want an appropriate usage for it, a set of governing terms. If you change your mind, we'll make it available tomorrow, but I'm also not responsible for the impact to your inbox. So well, what you want to do is your own choice.
And I can tell you, I've seen a new POC start getting phone calls the next day. Like, clearly they're getting the data.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, clearly some are getting the data. What's unknown is what quantity would obtain the data if it was available for bulk download, even if we said not to, and use it. Unknown.
Thank you.
Yes. Martin?
Martin Levy, CloudFlare. 3 locations, 6 servers. When will this move to the cloud? And I mean that seriously.
Yep.
Because your numbers on your query rates, I mean, it also would solve this previous question.
Yep.
This is 2018. You should be able to do millions of queries and not even sweat.
Agreed.
So that's a great idea. We need to hear again from you folks, including particularly you folks that have a cloud, whether or not any of you care about a dependency on a cloud provider in our services. We've historically been told to avoid that because sometimes people come to us when other things don't work. And it would be a shame if we weren't available. But if you say we can live higher in the stack, please tell us.
And let me be the first to say I do agree with that as a concern. Yeah, that's a valid question.
Actually, back Mike.
Hi, Lee Howard, Rotevia. I wanted to do a little bit of follow-up. As somebody who has in the past signed the bulk who has download AUP and has used it for research, it essentially says that you will not use the information for spam. That's really, that's the only limitation. I do not think that ARIN should remove that AUP. Thank you for having that. And I think that actually rate limiting at some reasonable number, both as a DDoS defense, but also to make it harder for bad guys to to get data. Okay, they'll still get some, but let's make it a little bit harder. I'm totally cool with all this. I also have no objections to the cloud. The research I've done is says to me that they are the well-known cloud providers do an excellent job, but only the ones that also support IPv6, which makes it a much smaller number.
Thank you, Lee. Go ahead, front Mike.
Andrew Dahl, is the abuse you're seeing only on port 43, or is it the other ones as well?
It's primarily on 43, but we have seen abuse on the other protocols as well, who is RWS as well as RDAP, and both on v4 and v6.
And as a follow-up, is the targeting source IP address based or something else?
It's actually per network based.
Per network based, okay.
So, back Mike.
Job Snyders, NTT Communications. A few small comments. Indeed, I would like to encourage you to consider moving to the cloud. Mm-hmm. It can bring tremendous benefits in terms of operations and help people spend their time on more worthwhile tasks. Secondly, in the targeting, has anybody ever complained that they, by accident, hit this limit? Like, is there a feedback loop where you accidentally ended up targeting a good guy?
Actually, we did end up targeting a good guy.
Sorry, you did or did not?
We did. And we actually talked to them and say, hey, why are you doing this? And they went back and looked at their systems, and somehow magically it went away. So, and there's a whole bunch of different reasons. When you start looking at the logs on these, when we see these high rates, you start looking at the data, and most of the time you can see patterns that occur. And a lot of the questions that are asked is, hey, give me 1.1.1.1, now give me 1.1.1.2, so on and so forth and so forth and so forth, coming from places all over the world.
So if you only got one complaint, then I would like to congratulate you on picking the correct parameters. Well done.
Good actors can become inadvertent propagators of bad behavior through typos in code, but they're quick to correct it when we point it out.
Yes, back Mike.
Hello, Daniel Klaus, Archaeo Futurist. I would just make the suggestion of perhaps multiple clouds providers. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good feedback. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Doug Montgomery Nest, I didn't see it mentioned. Do your RPKI publication points get deployed over that same infrastructure, or is it a different question of scaling and replication?
So when this occurs, they're on separate hardware in the same sites. We do not have a problem with bandwidth on these particular sites, so they would not be affected.
Doug, if I understand your question correctly, will they be affected is what Mark answered. No, they won't be affected. But if you were asked the question, are they protected? Is that the question? Are they protected by the same infrastructure and detection and tar pitting? I believe the answer is not at this time.
No, it's not at this time. But then again, we're not seeing the same rates on the people actually going against our repos. And frankly, we need to move from rsync to RRDP as well. And again, you could put that in the cloud and the problem is solved.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.